Welcome to Money Matters, the podcast that focuses on how to use the money you have, make the money you need, and save the money you want. Now, here is your host, Ms. Kim Chapman.
Welcome to another edition of Money Matters, where we talk about how to use the money you have, make the money you need, and save the money you want. And the key word here is talk about money. It is such a difficult conversation sometimes. And so today we're going to talk about how do you have those money discussions? Because when you think about it, it impacts every relationship that you have. So whether you have a spouse, a partner, if you have kids, money impacts that relationship. So joining me today, because I can't have this conversation by myself, is Miss Ericka Young, founder of Tailor Made Budgets. Good morning, Ericka, and thank you for joining me.
Good morning. So good to be here. And I love talking about money. So we are going to have a
All
good
right, that
time.
makes two of us. So many people don't like talking about money. I love talking about money. You love talking about money. So maybe by the end of this episode, we can convince other people that it's not such a bad conversation to have.
Yeah. Actually, that's my hope, right? Is to normalize the conversation and make it one that is easier, more enjoyable, and fruitful in the end for those who decide to partake.
Kick off talking about, why do you love talking about money? What is your background in money?
Well, I'm an engineer by trade, and I stumbled into a money conversation because my husband and I found ourselves in over $60,000 in debt when we got married in our early 20s. And then that increased when we had kids. Of course, they are expensive, and we wanted more, safer, reliable vehicles, and that brought our debt total up to about 90 grand. And so in the first 5 years of our relationship, we committed to getting free of all $90,000 in debt. And because that required us to really understand what we were trying to do and how to do that as a team, those conversations, even when there was tension around them, we're really wanting to make that a high priority in our relationship, especially since most relationships, when they're having challenges, that causes a lot of tension in relationships is that money matter. And so we did not want that to be our story. And we wanted, obviously, to end up, staying married for a lifetime. And so we worked on the hardest thing, honestly. And so far, it's paid off. 27 years married and no debt to speak of
That
right
is
now.
awesome. Well, I heard you say that keyword tension, that there were times that there were tension when you talked about it. Why do you think couples find it so difficult to talk about money?
There's a lot of reasons. One is we make our money, we want to hold on to our money. We feel like it's ours, like mine, versus ours being a team effort in terms of how we manage the money. And then another reason why people tend to not want to discuss it is embarrassment, shame, regret, remorse over the things that they've done with their money. And they just really don't want to disclose that. So when we're thinking about sharing credit reports, for instance, what is on there, debt amounts, things like that, or even our daily behaviors. Sometimes it's embarrassing. And I think another reason why we don't talk about it is because we really want to feel independent. We don't want to have to answer to somebody about our numbers. And so I think with couples, that can just create tension on many different levels. There's also just income inequalities, right? And so one person may make substantially more than the other and that kind of thing. And so it causes a power disparity potentially. And so there can be a myriad of reasons why people don't want to talk about money. I like to make the conversation easier by not even talking about today's issues with money and starting with our money past and what we learned growing up and what we did with money when we first started making it and what we witnessed in our families of origin. And so when we go back into our past, that tends to make the conversation less accusatory and more informational around this is how I was made, I was built, this is what I learned, and understanding can begin there. So that's honestly, I'll be honest, I learned that by watching hundreds of clients struggle with money conversations and realizing that it's so much less intrusive to just talk about how you were raised and your first interactions with money. And so that can be a gateway into having more challenging or deep conversations around the subject.
So how do you start that conversation? If somebody's listening and they're thinking, okay, this is going to be empowering for me. What are those first words? How do you start that conversation?
It honestly depends on where you are in the relationship, right? And how much trust has been built. And people know that for themselves. They know if the conversation needs to begin with, how much do you tip and tell me more about, what makes you do that, to deeper conversations around, your money past and what your parents taught you and as a child, what you saw in terms of your family structure. So for instance, it's easy for me to talk about the fact that I came from a single parent household and how challenging it was for my mother to really just make ends meet. And so while we lived in the suburbs, um, we didn't necessarily have all the things that everybody else around me had. She just wanted to ensure that there was a safe environment. And when someone knows that about me, then they can understand why frugality has become so important to me, or my hesitancy to spend larger sums of money, because frankly those were not things. I mean, we had to be frugal, we had to wait till payday, we didn't have extra sums of money, there wasn't frivolous spending of any sort. And so that is essentially how I was built. And so when my husband can understand that, then he can, you know talk with me, walk with me, work with me in regards to that in a more loving and understanding way. And so I know that he can handle that conversation. Whereas, on your second date, like, I don't think that's necessarily going to happen. But I do think as more trust is built, the deeper conversations can be had. And so it can begin with a conversation around tipping. It can begin around the type of work that you have. It can start with your first job as a young person and what that meant to you and what you did with those funds. I just think sometimes it's really easier to make it lighthearted than super deep and see where those conversations go. I do, however, think you need to set some ground rules. I always like to say, when we're talking about money, just say, hey, there's no judgment here. And you want to listen more than you talk if the questions are being posed by you. And so I think, making sure that it's a safe space is really important, especially when you haven't had conversations like this before.
So, thinking back in your own situation, I want to talk a little bit about money personalities. Would you say that you and your husband had the same money personality? And then, how big a role do different money personalities play in having those conversations?
Well, first, they play a huge role because no two people are alike. We're all unique and our experiences are unique. And what we bring to the table is also unique. And so I think it's important to respect different money personalities. Now, I'll just speak on two of them. One is a saver and a spender. Early on, I was the saver. I just really wanted to ensure that my future was going to be secure. Um, I had fear, not really anxiety, but I just had concern that if I didn't save enough, like, I knew that nobody else would be able to take care of me. I was not a trust fund kid. Like, there was no money coming my way, right? When my parents made their transition, and so I needed to know that I could take care of myself. And so I was a saver. My husband is a spender. He just likes nicer things, if you will. And so when we first got together, he would be the one whose wardrobe was way more expensive than mine. He would be the one who um didn't hesitate to spend money on different things, whereas I always hesitated and always felt like I needed um to wait and sleep on those conversations around bigger picture items. And now, sometimes I find that it depends on what it is. I'm definitely more of a spender when it comes to clothing and shopping, and I love travel now. Um, and there are certain things that he's more frugal on, and he's like, it's not worth it to me to spend money on that. And so, um, I have found that it's different areas for different people. And we both enjoy, we think it's really important to save for our future. And so we definitely align on that. But I think, in terms of those two major personalities, I think we flip flop a little bit. We started in one area, and I think over time, we've rubbed off on each other a little bit. And so while that can be good, we just, we make sure that our savings is on autopilot. So nothing that we do is going to derail that progress. But yeah, money personalities can change. And I think a lot of times for people, it's broader. It can be broader than just a spender or a saver. I think it can be even more nuanced than that. But when you understand who you are, it helps other people to understand you a little bit better too.
When I think of those money personalities, and especially when they're the opposite, like you said, the spender, the saver, I picture a seesaw and that struggle to
Yeah.
find balance. You've got one person way up here, being dominant. I want to save. Then you've got somebody, then they're up in the air. No, I want to be the spender. But it's almost like trying to find that perfect balance like you can with the seesaw, right? But kids don't even know what that feels like anymore. They don't play on the playground. So one of the
Right.
key
Yeah.
words that you talked about earlier is trust, right? Building that trust in a relationship. How big a role is transparency? Because, we want to have our independence and we want to have that connecting unit, but how can you have that connecting unit, remain independent, but be transparent?
Yeah. I honestly do think for a long time, I'll be honest, for a long time, I thought one checking account, one saving account, no secrets, right? Like I was of the camp of everything in one pot. And in some regards, that works for people. And for others, it doesn't. Some people need more autonomy for their finances themselves, as long as there's no secrets, right? So, for instance, I have for some of my clients, because now that, I've been a financial coach for 20 years, I've worked with hundreds of different people. And obviously, all people are different and unique circumstances can arise. But I also think autonomy is a huge deal. And so sometimes it's yours, mine, ours, as long as yours and mine are not hidden. And so in budgeting, practically speaking, sometimes it turns into we are designating this dollar amount to go into each of our accounts, our separate accounts, but the rest of it goes to the household unit, right? And they can determine how much it is that stays in separate accounts so that they don't have to justify their Starbucks latte or they don't have to justify going out to golf with the fellas or whatever it is. It is really, I set aside, we both agreed to what these dollar amounts are that are in these potential separate accounts. And so, for instance, so we don't necessarily, my husband and I don't have separate checking accounts. However, he does have his play money. We call it his play money. And he just takes it out the bank or out the credit union every, 2 weeks. And it builds up. And so one day he was like, I want to go get a bike. And I was like, okay. And, my husband doesn't do anything small, nothing at all. And so I was like, okay, how much is that? And I mean, it wasn't I mean, it was over $1,000 bike. And I'm thinking, are you serious right now? And it was Christmas time. And I'm thinking, really right now? And he's like, don't worry. I got my play money that I've been setting aside. And, so come with me and let's look at these bikes and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay. So a part of me relaxed tremendously that knew like he's not going to be so spontaneous that he wants to just spend $1,000 or whatever it was um in the heat of the moment. He had been saving for months actually. And he had those dollars and so that works for him. Me, I don't think I have in our 27-year relationship spent $1,000 on any one thing unless it was a gift he gave me or something like that's not. I'll spend it on travel, but I don't think I have anything. Not a purse, not nothing. Anything that not even my bike. My
Part of the
bike was
swallow.
$600. I'm like, but he knows. I think it works for both of us because in the budget, we have this line item. And then he also just saves it and he doesn't spend money a lot. But when he does, it's like a big punch, right? So he'll buy a suit and it's $500, but he has his money that he's been setting aside. So I think that that can work for people, and it reduces stress around the question, can we afford it? It really is, I set money aside already, or I have money in this account that we've already discussed, and I just want to make this decision. And then it just reduces any of the anxiety that could potentially come.
I have to ask, did you get the bike and did you ride it? Does it feel like $1,000 when your hair is blowing in the wind?
Listen, I do not ride that. I ride my bike that is $600. He got his bike and he enjoys it, and he's had it for several I mean, he enjoys his bike. So hey, more power to him, but I just didn't think I needed to spend that kind of money. So I got something that was like half the price.
In a perfect world, all these stories would win, like would end up like this. But we know we don't live in that perfect world. So at what point should a couple recognize that they need maybe some outside help, maybe like a professional financial counselor?
That's so good. And I think people can go to a professional financial counselor, coach, therapist, or just a coach, therapist, counselor who isn't specific to money. Here's why. Because if communication is broken down, this is one sign. If you have a hard time just talking about money, the bills that are due, the goals that you have, and you need a safe space to be able to do so, that mediary could be that person. And likely, this is not the only area. Finances may not be the only area in which the conversations are difficult between you. Obviously, trust, where you just don't believe that they are going to do or say what they, it just, the follow through just isn't there. So for instance, if bills aren't getting paid on time, if debt is racking up, those kinds of warning signs. And, I also think specifically if if you're needing a financial counselor, I would say if you have goals that you've been trying to reach and you just haven't been able to get there, right? So something is in the way. It could just be tension in your relationship with money, or in the way that your methodology around how you're trying to do it, or you can't agree on what it looks like to achieve these financial goals. That's, I think, when you need a financial professional to help you. And you've been circling that same mountain for a couple years. So we're wasting time if we continue to circle the same mountain. And so I would encourage you to seek the help of a professional if that is the case. And I think there's no shame in that. I applaud, admire, and respect anyone who understands where they are not 100% strong in, to get stronger with the help of someone else. And so take that as a sign. Communication, trust, those are the biggies. But if you are still circling goals for a long
I know
time.
you work a lot with couples. I do too, but I think you see a lot more couples than I do. Early on in a relationship, or how early in a relationship, even somebody that's not married, should those couple start having those conversations? What are the things that you should be looking for in your partner financially in terms of, is this a good fit? Are we going to be able to balance this seesaw? It's okay that we're opposites, but what are those things that we should be looking for?
That's a really good question. So one thing that I'll say about a spender and a saver is that it is best, to be honest, if there's one of each in the relationship, because the spender helps you have fun, okay? And the saver makes sure you have a future. So both of them, it would be great to have both of them in a relationship. So um, i- when people are dating, you can begin to tell if they're just as a free spirit as you are, right? If they don't care anything about the future, if in terms of saving for it, they live for the moment. Um, but if I honestly think just start paying attention first, like literally just start looking at their behaviors and habits. Do they keep cash on the hand? Are they always, reducing? reducing what it is that they do because they don't have the funds to do so? Are they overspending? Or are they, people who like all of the nicer things? I mean, there can be lots of things to be watching out for even before you begin having conversations.
And so I'll switch gears just a little bit. We've been talking a lot about couples and just the tension that couples have when they're talking about money. But we know often they're children. And sometimes, you laughed and we talked about in the beginning that how expensive children can be. And so just the expensive cost and things that add to a family dynamic. But children need to learn about money too. And so, how can we have those conversations with our children? When should we even start to have conversations with children?
I think the biggest thing that we can do with our kids, excuse me, I think the biggest thing that we can do with our kids is let them witness what we do. They will model what they see people doing. So talk to them. And honestly, if they're less than 3 or 4, they're not paying enough
Right.
attention. Their attention span is very short. But let's just talk about a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, someone, I mean, they are very attentive and they love learning, especially when it's not the formal kind of learning, right? And so you can have conversations about, you know, using your debit card and what it takes. Like, I mean, it's very common for parents to say, make sure you close the refrigerator, like that's electricity right there, and
25
help them
cents.
to understand it. It is, right? Turn the light off when you're done, right? And so these kinds of things are like tying it to money. Now, we don't want them to be overly worried about every single thing that they do, but by the time they get to be 11, 12, 13, they fully understand that they are connected because you've been having this conversation. One of the biggest things that misses that I see parents make is trying to protect their kids from the the places where parents have made mistakes or tripped over themselves or done things that they wish they had not with money. They don't say it to their kids. And so they're shielding them from real life. And what I think is a challenge for kids now is to understand that everything isn't going to be perfect, right? And incomes vary, life situations vary, where you live has a cost to it. And I think as they get older, it is important to have age appropriate conversations with them around what that looks like. And by the time a child is 15 or 16, they should know what a car vehicle costs, right? And they should know what it takes, right, to maintain that vehicle. So one of the biggest lessons that we taught our kids at that age is we first of all, you're getting your license. You will have a vehicle so you can take yourself to and from all the places. And we'll pay for half of that car. You save up your money and we will match what you save. And so our first daughter got a car that was $3,800 because she saved 1,900. And our second daughter got a car that was 5,600. And she saved half of that. And so, and that pride and ownership is huge for young people. And so they treat those vehicles better. They named their cars. They were sad. I mean, frankly, my oldest, she did hit the house and she
Oh.
lost her rear view mirror, her side mirror rather. And she learned how to put it back on because my husband helped her to find a mirror to put on and taught her how to put it on. And these things are important, right? And getting a car wash and putting gas in the car. And so, but it was a progression. I mean, we taught work and reward at young ages. So between the ages of 5 and 10, for sure, you do chores and you get paid for those things. And so I think it's important that we make it a part of life, not all of life, but a part of life, all throughout, and don't wait until this magic number. 12 is not the magic number. If a child is learning at 12 and they have never heard of what it means to have a debit card or what money looks like in their hand, that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a larger uphill swing, right? But if you start younger, I think that can be beneficial. But there's lots of ways, books even. I mean, we've read books with our kids. We've had watch videos and things like that, just to sprinkle in educational opportunities at home, because frankly, they don't get it, around money in school for a long time. It's not really till high school that they really start talking about money for real.
And so, we're talking about how do you have those conversations, but I do want to take a minute and say, how do we actually show them? For example, I remember my dad always talked about saving and that you should do it, right? That's talking the talk. But how do you actually sit down and really show your kids what saving money looks like so that they can really pick that up as a habit? And obviously, the earlier they develop that habit, the better off they will be, and anybody that learns that particular habit.
Well, it can start with something that they're interested in, right? So Barbie dolls are not cheap, right? So if you want a Barbie house or whatever it is, I mean, if that thing is $50 and you have been giving them, their work and reward, right? So they had a chores that they were doing over time, and they are setting aside $5 a week or whatever it is. I think that that can be an easy way to help them understand how to save for something they want. Frankly, a lot of young people can't really have accounts necessarily until they're, teenager-ish, age. But I think up until that point, it'd be great to save it in cash, put it in envelopes, have it at the house, let them literally feel the money in their hands for what they desire. I'd like for young people to learn to give, save, and spend, and they have 3 envelopes, and our society has gotten away from cash, but I think kids are so visual,
Yes.
and they need that, and so I think having, you know, ensuring that each time that they earn dollars, that they put some in each one of those envelopes, and we actually painted little piggy banks, we made little boxes for their give, save, spend, um, and you can capitalize on making it fun at young ages. It's when they get to be teenagers and they're able to actually have accounts that making it maybe automatic or putting a portion of their you know lawn mowing dollars into savings makes it real. But I think it's important that we start with that physical $5, $1 in hand, for them to actually connect with the fact that it's money. Because once we start introducing debit cards and virtual money on a phone and all that kind of stuff, I mean, the connection to how real it is and its finality really sometimes get lost, even with adults. So I like to say for the younger population, they need to have the dollars in hand.
I agree. I was gonna make that same comment that not only is it important for children to have that connection, but I think even for adults, if you talk to an adult, they'll tell you it's a lot harder to part with a physical $20 bill than it is to swipe that debit card for $20.
Yes,
And so
sure,
sometimes
for sure.
cash is king really, really can have a role. So earlier we talked a little bit about, instinctively as parents, we want to shield our kids from all the negative stuff. But at the same time, we want them to know the reality of life, right? That sometimes there's going to be ups and downs with money. So how do you find that balance between keeping them shielded to where they're not sleeping, having sleepless nights like, "Oh, how's the light bill gonna get paid? How am I gonna pay for my prom dress?" But also letting them understand that sometimes it's give and take, and sometimes we just don't have enough money to purchase everything that they want.
Yeah. I think we have to really pay attention to our money messages. So, um, it's important to have age appropriate money messages, right? And so there's something to be said for saying we don't have the money versus we need to figure out how to put that in the budget for next month. Or, and so these are messages that we hear. I heard, um, we're broke, wait till payday, we don't have the money. I heard those things over and over and over again. Um, and those get deeply ingrained. And so I like to say, let's create a plan. Let's figure out how we can see if this is important. Does this fit into our goals? Those kinds of things versus we don't have it. And so shifting the language is important. But also the other thing is some things you say and some things you don't. Like we're not necessarily telling them how much we make
Yes, they'll
annually,
go to
right? Like
school
that's
and tell
not
everybody,
necessarily
right?
Exactly. So our kids didn't know how much we made until we started having the FAFSA conversations for college. Like they might have had an idea, but it wasn't until they were like 18 that they actually started realizing what it was concretely, right? And so, but prior to that, that wasn't a conversation that we had. Now, I have shown them electric bills. I have also shown them, like we play games all the time with groceries, and let them see how much things cost at the grocery store. That's such an easy way to help your children connect with money. Um, and and then there were times when they were young, I said, all right, you both have $100. I want you to write on paper which dining out places you want to go to and how much you would spend at these places. And so for 30 days, we just did that. They led the way, right, with where we decided to go dining out. And it caused them that caused them to say, I love Chick-fil-A, but what I really want is their shake. Like, I'm not necessarily interested in everything else because if I do that, for the whole family at the time was going to be over $30, $40 just to go to Chick-fil-A. And so she was like, hold on, are we good if if me and my sister get shakes? Do y'all care? You know what I mean? Like they were like critically
Really
thinking. And so
invested in it.
those kind of exactly. And so that made a difference, right? And there are exercises like when my daughter did get a debit card when she was a teenager and she didn't realize how much getting cookies and snacks and stuff at school was adding up. And so we sat down one day and I added it up and I said, I want you to tell me how much you think you spent on snacks just at school for 30 days. And she said, oh, probably $10. And then when we added it up, it was over 30, almost $40. And she was like, she had no idea, right? But it makes sense if you're at school 20 days out of the month and she's spending $2 a day. Like for her, she just thought it was so much less. And so that was a reality check for her. And so I just think that we can weave these conversations in and know that one, they don't have to know how much your investments are. They don't have to know how much debt in total that you're in. But I think my kids were along the journey I should say my oldest was along the journey when we were getting out of debt, and we celebrated when we were out of debt. She didn't know how much it was, but she was, 6 years old when we got out of debt, and we celebrated. We let her know, like, we're done with debt. We don't have any. And she was like, so mommy, it's debit. We like debit, not debt. And yes, she had that in her mindset. So um she wasn't afraid of the conversation around us being in debt. We learned to show her, hey, we have a plan. And so this is the plan in terms of we have a specific amount for dining out or for toys or whatever. And when that money is done, it's done because our goal is to get free of debt. And so she was along that journey. Again, we didn't tell her how much it was at the time, and we didn't, make her feel like she couldn't. We just had healthy boundaries around what we could say yes to while we were on that journey.
And so I want to talk a little bit just about the benefits of financial counseling because, of course, sometimes those conversations can be difficult. And no matter what end of the spectrum you're on, you have two people talking, but they're just not able to come on the same page. And it may not necessarily even be that there's a financial difficulty, but financial coaching, free, good sound financial counseling can really be impactful and beneficial. So talk a little bit about how important it is, whether you're in a financial crisis or if you just want to make sure that you're doing the right thing, how important financial coaching can be in someone's life.
Well, it can be really helpful because we don't know what we don't know, right? We all have blind spots. We all have places that we can't see because they're behind us or what have you. And a good counselor can help bring that to the forefront. Um, they can say, have you thought about this? They have great questions that help you to ponder, really all of your life choices, right? So a good counselor can help bring to light things that we either suppress or we've never really thought about or we're scared to confront. I also think that a great counselor or coach will create an environment where it's safe enough to say what you may not have been able to say to your partner outside of that space, or to divulge. Um, I had a woman come to me one time and she said, I've got $25,000 in debt and I have not told my spouse. And that is why he isn't here, because I haven't shared that with him yet. And I said, well, and I coached her through what it looked like to have this conversation with him, and um, what made it so important for her to share that. And I also needed to understand a bit more about his mentality and where this concern and fear came from. We definitely don't want retaliation or anything like that. And I believe she had a safe space at home. It's just she just was living in her own shame. And again, a coach can kind of assess that. But then she called me later and said the conversation went really well. I felt empowered. Um, and we together realized that it's because the dollars that we set aside for, groceries, the kids, and all that was not enough. And I would overspend on credit, and it has just built this up. And so we're reworking things together. And so um, her feeling that empowerment came from a conversation with the coach. And so my hope is that anytime you go to a third party, be it a therapist, counselor, coach, whatever, that in fact you are a better human walking away. Like, you feel enlightened, you feel lighter, you have more ideas. You feel like you can go do that very next thing, whatever it is concerning your finances. If you feel defeated, sad, still remorseful, carrying a lot of shame and guilt, something is amiss. And it's okay to find a different person. But I think that the benefits outweigh the 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 feeling of hesitation or concern you might have on what will be divulged, because I think it's important that we live in a space of honesty, even with ourselves, right? And if we have people who are skilled in being able to help people in this area, it's just a win-win for everyone.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that key thing is, like you said, having that open communication. You made a really, really good point earlier. Is that sometimes we just don't know what we know. It was actually when you were talking about your daughter that made me think so many of our clients, when we, see people for our blueprint for financial success, they come in and they think, oh, I've only been spending $200 a month on this. And then they realize after going through financial counseling that, oh, I've been spending $500. And just bringing that awareness can bring about change, can make a big, big difference. And so I really think it is such an important part of having those conversations. If you can't have them on your own, then seek somebody that can definitely provide that service for you. So, Ericka, share with our listeners how they can reach out to you, what you can do for them as we wrap up.
I love that. So you can find me on all the social platforms, Ericka Young Official, on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. You can also tune in to our podcast for Better and Worth. My husband and I have, as our empty nester phase approached, we decided to jump in and do a podcast of our own where we talk about the intersection between relationships and money, and having conversations that, help you have that relationship, but also build wealth. And but the work that I do is largely financial education, training and development. I love helping other coaches up-level their skill sets. That is primarily the work that I'm into, as well as working with financial institutions, specifically credit unions, ensure that their internal teams are well equipped to help people around coaching as well as financial education. So Ericka Young Official is the best way to find me. And then on my website, uh, erickayoung.com is where you can get more information about what that looks like.
Well, thank you so much. We'll have to continue this conversation, and maybe next time I'll come and join you on your podcast.
Let's go.
All right. Thank you,
Awesome.
Ericka.
Thanks for having me.
It's time for Blueprint Building Blocks. Small changes that lead to big financial wins. Let's stack up for success.
Start the conversation. Whether with your partner or your kids, choose one small money topic to talk about this week. Keep it simple and judgment-free. Set a rhythm. Schedule those regular check-ins with your spouse or your partner about money. Even 15 minutes once a week can make a huge difference. And then teach your kids by example. Kids learn by watching. Let them see you budget, save, or even talk through a purchase decision.
That's a wrap on today's Blueprint Building Blocks. Stay on track with your financial journey. Subscribe to the Money Matters podcast and visit neighborsfcu.org/financial wellness for more tools to help you build a strong financial future.